All right, thanks. Welcome to the January 11th Swampscott Select Board meeting. Before we get started, if you'll just join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so thanks everyone for being here. I am going to, before we go to public comments, I want to pick up the first item of our agenda. As many people are likely aware, there was an incident last Friday, January 6th, where there was a swastika was spray painted on the street in front of a home on Reddington Street in Swampscott. And I wanted to have a conversation about that and a discussion about that incident. And it's good to see Rabbi Michael Rogozин's here. And I know Sean's been in touch with other folks in town in our police department, and we'll mention right off the top that the town is organizing in coordination with the police department, a rally tomorrow, an event, No Place for Hate on Monument Ave, I believe the corner of Monument and Burrell, at 5 o'clock. So I encourage folks to go to that. So I'm so glad, Rabbi, that you could be here tonight. So for new members of the board and for the public, I want to just, if you can humor me for a moment. Last year, Rabbi Rogozin sent an email to the board making us aware of a virtual summit that was occurring in March, which was inviting state and regional municipal leaders and officials. It was sponsored by the Lapin Foundation, National Jewish Advocacy and Education nonprofit organization, about steps we can take against anti-Semitism. Sean Fitzgerald and I attended that summit, and after we attended, we chatted and agreed to follow up by taking some of the recommended actions that we had heard there. The main recommendation was to endorse the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's non-binding definition of anti-Semitism. Municipalities in Massachusetts that have done so include Duxbury, Danvers, Brighton, and Peabody, to name a few. In preparing for this, seeing that these other communities had taken this action in January, also declaring January as Holocaust Awareness Month and January 27th as Holocaust Remembrance Day, because it marked the anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration and extermination camp, I decided it would make sense to bring this to our board sometime at the end of 2022 or at our first meeting in January of 2023. Last week, when I was preparing for this meeting with Sean and putting together our proclamation, I decided that in addition to that, it would make sense to provide some recent examples of anti-Semitism in our area. Unfortunately, there were, of course, you probably aren't surprised that there were plenty to choose from. Like in January in Marblehead at the village school, when swastikas were found etched into the boys' room stalls, and graffiti containing profane language targeted at Jewish people was discovered in the girls' bathroom on a couple of occasions. Or in February in Danvers, when anti-Semitic, homophobic, and racist graffiti was found in the girls' bathroom at the Holton Richmond School. Or in June in Peabody, when individuals associated with the Goyim Defense League, an anti-Semitic hate group, distributed anti-Semitic propaganda. Or on September 11th in Saugus, when a group of individuals displayed a banner over a freeway overpass that read, "Jews did 9/11. These were just a few from a long list available on the Anti-Defamation League's tracker. I thought using these examples would be a good way to illustrate the point that such incidents happen all around us, and they have and can certainly continue to happen here. And then, of course, on Friday last week, as we are all now aware, somebody spray painted a swastika on the sidewalk on Reddington Street here in Swampscott, which is both a sad but profound coincidence that we were planning on doing this anyways, but in some ways a good, strong reminder of the need for us to do this in the first place. These incidents are so frequent and commonplace that I think we become numb to them and the impact that they have and the harm and the hurt that they cause. But we certainly can't ignore them, and it is important for us to recognize that anti-Semitism, racism, discrimination, hatred, and hate speech do exist and do happen in our community, and we need to be vocal in our opposition to them and vigilant in our continuous pursuit to make this town a community of peaceful understanding, empathy, appreciation, and coexistence. As I mentioned, one specific action that was recommended at the virtual summit that we attended was to endorse the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's non-legally binding definition of anti-Semitism. The IHRA, for short, of which the United States is a part, is the only intergovernmental organization mandated to focus solely on Holocaust-related issues. Most of the following information that I will read now comes from them and the materials that we received at this virtual summit that we attended last year. With evidence that the scourge of anti-Semitism was on the rise, the IHRA resolved to take a leading role in combating it, and they determined that in order to begin to address the problem, the first step was to have clarity about what anti-Semitism is. A 2021 American Jewish Community Survey of American public opinion documented that nearly a third of all Americans had never heard of the word anti-Semitism or did not know what it means. Others may be uncertain about what makes something anti-Semitic, and this underscores the fundamental challenge in fighting anti-Semitism. If we cannot describe what it is, how can we take responsible action to address it? So the IHRA established a definition that has been endorsed by many government bodies around the world, including the United States, and this definition is as follows, and it will also be included in the proclamation that we'll read later. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. IHRA provides the following examples that may serve as illustrations. Manifestations might include the targeting of the State of Israel, conceived as a Jewish collectivity. However, criticism of Israel, similar to that leveled against any other country, cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism frequently charges Jews with conspiring to harm humanity and is often used to blame Jews for why things go wrong. It is expressed in speech, writing, visual forms, and action, and employs sinister stereotypes and negative character traits. Contemporary examples of anti-Semitism in public life, the media, schools, the workplace, and in the religious sphere could, taking into account the overall context, include, but are not limited to, calling for, aiding, or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of radical ideology or an extremist view of religion, making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews as such, or the power of Jews as collectives, such as, especially but not exclusively, the myth about a world of with Jewish conspiracy or of Jews controlling the media, economy, government, or other societal institutions, accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or group, or even for acts committed by non-Jews, denying the facts, scope, mechanisms, or intentionality of the genocide of the Jewish people at the hands of National Socialist Germany and its supporters and accomplices during World War II and the Holocaust, accusing the Jews as a people or Israel as a state of inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust, accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interests of their own nations, denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination by claiming that the existence of the State of Israel is a racist endeavor, applying double standards by requiring of it a behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation, using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism to characterize Israel or Israelis, drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis, and holding Jews collectively responsible for actions of the State of Israel. So that's a lot to say, but I wanted to do more than just read a proclamation. I think that the other thing that I want to share is that when I was looking at the ADL tracker, a lot of the incidents that you see, not just in Massachusetts, but throughout the country, are occurring in schools. It's great to see the chair of our school committee here, and I know the schools have reacted the same way that the select board has and has been a part of organizing this event for tomorrow and promoting it. But it's very sad to see that a lot of these incidents, however, while they seem minor and are happening and being done by students in our schools in all of our towns and neighborhoods. So with that, I think I'd like to invite my fellow select board members to join me in reading this proclamation, and then I think we can have a conversation, and I would invite Rabbi Rogozin as well to say a few words. I think if we can just start with this proclamation, I'll just start with Sean. You can read the first paragraph, and then we'll just go down the table.
Sure. Thanks, Neil. Neil, I don't think there's anything more important for us to be doing right now. What I just truly want to share with Swampscott residents is that you live in a wonderful town full of wonderful people that truly do care about the values of our democracy. And it's so important that we not just issue a proclamation today, but really live these words and build these relationships and really continue to support all the things that we truly do care about. So this is an International Holocaust Remembrance Day, January 27th, and Holocaust Education Month, January proclamation by the town of Swampscott. Whereas the town of Swampscott will never forget the events of the Holocaust and the 6 million Jewish lives lost in the most tragic genocide in modern history. And
whereas anti-Semitic incidents continue to increase in the United States, reaching an all-time high in 2021, with a total of 2,717 incidents of assault, harassment, and vandalism reported to the Anti-Defamation League. This represents the highest number of incidents on record since the ADL began tracking them in 1979, an average of more than 7 incidents per day, and a 34% increase year over last year. And
whereas this year, on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, January 27, 2023, we commemorate the 78th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp. And
whereas honoring the victims and survivors begins with our renewal recognition of the value and dignity of each person. It demands from us the courage to protect the persecuted and speak out against bigotry and hatred. And
whereas on this anniversary, we recommit ourselves to combating the global rise in anti-Semitism and the evil that threatens not only those of Jewish faith, but those of all faith and backgrounds. And
whereas recent acts of hate in Swampscott serve as a painful reminder of our obligation to condemn and combat rising anti-Semitism in all of its forms, including the denial or trivialization of the Holocaust. And
whereas this anniversary is an important opportunity to reflect on the progress we have made confronting this terrible chapter in human history and our ongoing and continuing efforts to end genocide. And
whereas the definition of anti-Semitism reads as follows: anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. And
now therefore, on behalf of the entire Select Board, we do hereby proclaim January 27th, 2023 as International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and the month of January as Holocaust Education Month in the town of Swampscott, Massachusetts, and encourage all faith-based and nonprofit organizations, residents, businesses, and public institutions to acknowledge, honor, and value Jewish people's historic and current contributions locally and beyond, while also recognizing the ongoing and interconnected struggles of all Jewish communities locally and beyond.
In witness whereof we have hereunto set our hands and caused to be affixed the great seal of the town of Swampscott, Massachusetts, this 11th day of January, 2023.
Thanks, everybody. Rabbi Rogozin, I invite you to share a few words if you'd like.
Yeah. So, well,
You can pull that.
there we go. Okay. Just with gratitude to the town administrator, Sean, and the rest of the select board for today's proclamation. I don't know if any of you know the timing is quite significant, not because of the recent anti-Semitic events or the swastika on Reddington Street, but it happens to be that this week's scriptural reading is, if you will, the very first recording of organized anti-Semitism, in which Pharaoh notices the Jewish people are numerous in the land of Egypt and says, "Come, let us deal shrewdly with them," and begins a process of propaganda to turn the local populace against the Jewish people and enslave us, and then try to throw every boy in the Nile. And so as I sit here and witness what the town of Swampscott has just done, I think of the concept of a repair. That at this very moment in ancient times, how anti-Semitism was rising, I now witness that I live in a town that says we, as the organized leaders of this community, take a stand, a very strong stand, a full and encompassing proclamation, not only with a definition of anti-Semitism, but also of dedication to Holocaust awareness and so much more. And the expression that this statement means is very important to me. And I hope that for anyone else, both Jew and Gentile, the pride that we can have about living in a town that responds to hate in this way, that any other groups that experience racism, bigotry, discrimination based on sexual orientation, that we would all stand together and respond in a very similar and strong fashion. And it is an incredible credit to the leadership of this town to be able to witness and achieve today's work. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you so much. I invite if other board members have anything to add to the discussion.
Sure. It's been hard to see so much hatred around the world, so much hatred in our country, and so much hatred coming out of our quaint little beach town. And hate has no place in Swampscott. Hate's a learned behavior. Anti-Semitism is a learned behavior. We need to fight this hate not with additional hate, but with information. We need to fight this hate with education, and we need to fight and be vocal. And ultimately, with empathy and with love, recommit to condemn anti-Semitism in all forms. We need to love our neighbors and not just have a sign in our yard, but we actually need to love our neighbors regardless of, regardless of race, regardless of sexual orientation, and regardless of religion. Let us love, let us learn, let us inform. There is no room for hate.
Rabbi, I would be interested in Katie and I before the meeting, we're having a conversation, and there is no place for hate in Swampscott, but the reality is it's alive and well here, and some would say thriving everywhere right now. And while this may be a more grotesque example of it, it lives in so many other ways every day that I think we have as a society increasingly become numb. It has become part of our rhetoric in politics as politics gets more and more tribal. It's on the TV as we're eating dinners in the backgrounds. And for some reason, it's accepted and not called out at the dinner table. It's walking down the street and just witnessing small misdeeds or miswords and not calling them out in every moment, in every place. And so tonight we're talking about it, and Neil, it is an unfortunate coincidence that it was on our agenda for this proclamation, but we're really spending a lot of time on it because of this incident that happened. And so I'm curious and forgive the ignorance of the question, if it is indeed ignorant, and what Katie and I, when I was asking of Katie, was there's a part of me that understands why when something appears on a sidewalk or on a building or in a public place, we quickly want to erase it. But there's a part of me that also doesn't want to quickly erase it because I want to keep that dialogue going. I want people to live in that place of discomfort, to see that that is actually a reality here in Swampscott. It is a reality in Marblehead. It is a reality in Saugus. It is a reality everywhere. And to provoke a dialogue, and it's a really uncomfortable one. As a non-Jew talking about this, it's uncomfortable, despite where I know my heart and my mind are. And it's something that I should be spending more time talking to my kids about. And whether we're in a community that has very few buses, so we walk our kids every day. I believe we should be walking our kids by these things. And so how can we as a community continue actively, not reactively, but proactively continue these dialogues and quite literally the proverbial walk to school include these lessons? Because my fear is these are situational things and are being missed in our daily lives. And how can we have it show up more readily in our daily lives as a conversation and a learning point? The answer is?
On the spot.
The answer is, Rabbi?
I'm new to these meetings, and I didn't know if these were questions that were intended to be a
you
dialogue
can view it as rhetorical, but this is a dialogue place.
here, or if we wanted to have a larger conversation. I don't think we have a game plan for this is how you treat anti-Semitism, this is how you treat hate, because like we do in medicine about how you might fix a broken arm or a torn ACL. So I am not to say what will or will not work, but I agree with you in terms of the approach of the importance of at least preserving an image, if not leaving it in place. Neil referenced the graffiti in the Marblehead bathroom, and if you spell out the actual letters of that graffiti, it's, to me, much more intense than just saying profane language involving Jews. And so I, at that incident, was hoping that I would actually have a photograph of what it was and not just a description.
Right.
Same thing, I think that the middle ground, frankly, is that we should record an image of something and then it's appropriate to paint it over, even though there's a metaphor of covering it up. If we preserve the image and we act as the town is acting now, as schools, as a rally, et cetera, then I think we can balance the need for people to walk down the street and not see it, along with the people who want to walk down the street and be able to educate about it, because we can provide materials about images and walk people through that experience. So that's why I think we should take pictures of things and make them available to people, whether it's through an ADL website or some other way. And I forget exactly the precise question, if that's where the question lied. But I just wanted to say that your comment about how actually seeing images really resonates in a much more powerful way than verbal description sometimes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have small children. They don't know what a swastika is. They don't know what it means. But as I was trying to have this conversation with my son about, about an image being put somewhere that would be so offensive to somebody that not only would you not want to walk by it, but you would want to avoid it at all costs, and you would want to almost not talk about it because it's so emotionally invoking. His only response was, "Could I see it so I don't do it?" I was like, okay. Now he's 6.5. But I was so afraid to show him what it was. But his mind just said, well, I don't want to make that mistake, so show it to me.
Right.
So there's something so profound in that.
Right.
So I think Peter's point is a very strong one. And to have to walk by it, for kids to have to see it, to understand what it is, and for adults to see it and to be uncomfortable by it, it does have a very real effect. So I agree with your observations.
Yeah. Raising children is incredibly challenging. That's another area where we don't have any formula for success.
We'll be discussing that next week.
Yeah, you can come back.
You can come back.
But I have a lot of trust in individual parents to have the best sense with their own children and to lead from both their heart and their heads with their own kids. I think that there's a time and a place for, how we communicate, and age-appropriate communication is also important. So I wouldn't want to dictate for any particular child or any particular age. I'll leave that to the educators and the school board. But for older kids, the United States Holocaust Museum has an excellent about 35-minute video, which spends a lot of time on the rise of Nazi Germany and not so much time on the actual horrors of the Holocaust. And that is a really good, it may be high school age, it may be sort of middle school. I don't know exactly what the best age or when you can start to show that, but it's a really good way, and it might be useful also for adults, kind of to see then how the Nazi symbol is associated with Nazi power and how they rose to power and their program of genocide. That I think is very helpful for slightly older children. I'm certainly happy to share that offline, the details of that.
Well, thank you again. Thank you for sending out that email last year and nudging us to do something about this. I really appreciate it, and I think that never be afraid to reach out with more ideas and ways that we can help educate our town and the general public. I think, again, for tomorrow night, there's an event where we're coming together as a community to just publicly declare and be together and say that this is what we're about, and we're about loving one another and understanding one another. But then I think I don't think anyone on this board or in this town thinks that a proclamation necessarily solves anything. I do think it's important to do. I don't think these things are trivial, or we wouldn't be doing them. But I do think that we need to continue to work.
Thank you.
And so we look forward to working with you and many others on helping to keep chipping away at this problem.
Neil, thank you so much for championing this.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Rabbi, thank you
Thank you.
for everything that you do, bringing some wisdom here to us. I think we know that this isn't just a government and a faith-based obligation. It's civic. It's about our sports teams. It's about our nonprofits. It's about all of the organizations. This conversation has to go everywhere. It has to go to all of our faith-based institutions. And we've got to really reach out and get beyond the incident and just get to helping everybody understand that we are all together. And by coming together and supporting each other, especially during times of the vitriol that we hear on our national level. And let's just call it what it is. It's just hate. And when we have more hate in our politics, when we have more hate in the dialogue, we have more anti-Semitism, we have more crimes against gays or transgender people. All of this is part of a community that's bigger than Swampscott, but certainly affects Swampscott. So
Definitely.
we've got to stay together and really come up with a few programs that really help us support the type of ideals that we have as a community.
Yeah, indeed. And I should also add is, as an extension of the town, the Swampscott Police Department, their outreach to us has been phenomenal. Detective Delano has really taken the lead. Chief Quesada is incredibly supportive. And whenever we have an issue, we feel so supported. And the way in which the Swampscott Police Department represents the town is something to be commended. And I want that to be known as well.
I'll pass that along.
Please do.
Yeah, thanks for
That's nice
mentioning
to hear,
that.
because yesterday was Law Enforcement Day, and I'm sure that they would like to hear that appreciation.
I will share it with them as well.
I'm sure they're watching right now.
Thanks for mentioning that. Thanks for coming. We'll see you, hopefully we'll see you tomorrow night.
You got it.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. I think what I'll do is we will do public comment now, and then we'll move on to the other items on our agenda. Public comments, an opportunity for members of the public to express their opinions on items both on and not on the official agenda. It's not intended to be a discussion, debate, or dialogue between or among the Select Board and residents. Additionally, before sharing substantive comments, we ask residents to state their names, addresses, and if known, their voting precinct. Each speaker will be limited to speaking once for a maximum of 3 minutes. Residents may raise new issues, identify community problems, and comment on past, present, or future board agendas. Absent extraordinary circumstances, the board will not respond or react to the issues raised, and they should not be discussed or debated at that time. We request residents speak respectfully and refrain from criticizing or disparaging individual committee members, town staff, or other residents or resident groups or individuals. We request that residents refrain from making comments that contain political statements or include commentary, criticisms, or other statements about any town staff. Individuals may speak only at the discretion of the chair. Not seeing any public comment here in the room. It looks like Aaron Burdoff has his hand raised on Zoom. Diane, can you allow Aaron to speak? Oh, and let me just say, if people have public comment they want to share through email, they can do so by sending me an email at nduffy, D-U-F-F-Y, @swampscottma.gov.
Good evening. This is Aaron Burdoff, 11 Juniper Road, Precinct 5. I had a question about.
Aaron, can you hold on a
police
sec?
department.
Joe,
Yes, go ahead.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead,
All right.
sorry.
Can you hear me better then?
Yeah.
Yep.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you to the board. Again, Aaron Burdoff, 11 Juniper Road, Precinct 5. I had a question about Swampscott Police Department policy. Late last year, I'm sure everyone is well aware, the Swampscott Police Department in town rolled out some new body cameras for the police officers, which I think is wonderful, and I think a lot of people in town think this is a good move. However, I was trying to find a policy regarding those body cameras, specifically on questions of when officers are trained or obligated to turn those on, and also what access to the recordings of those body cameras does the public have, in times of they may be on those recordings, or if someone can access them via proxy in case the person in question is incapacitated or unable to. I reached out to Chief Quesada and didn't hear anything shortly after the announcement was made. Reached out to Captain Cable early December, as well as Sean later in the year as well, and haven't heard anything on that. So I'm just hoping that the board can do, I guess, a couple things. One is just identify whether there is a policy in existence that answers those questions, and hopefully make it public. Or, then, if I need to go to the police department and get the paper and copy it, I'm happy to do that. I just need to figure out how to get that policy. And if there's not a policy, I guess I've encouraged the board to ask the town as well as the police department to put one in place as soon as possible, because these are important questions, and I don't think we want to get to situations where they come out, the conflict comes up without the policy in place. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. We'll follow up with that question. Thanks so much. That's just Aaron, right?
I don't see anything else.
Okay. All right, not seeing any other public comment. Moving on to our next item, which is the draft conservation restriction for the Archer Street properties. If people in the public weren't aware, the board came to an agreement on the second of the two open space parcels on Archer Street, essentially in the Foster Road, Archer Street neighborhood, right at the end of the year. So we are still in the process of closing that acquisition, but both of those parcels will be under the ownership of the town of Swampscott very soon. So Pete Kane is here, our assistant town administrator, and human resources director is here he's been helping to manage these acquisitions and the next steps, and is here to give us an update on the conservation restriction. We have a draft copy of the proposed conservation restriction, but Pete's here just to explain what the steps are and what's involved. So I hand it over to you, Pete.
Pete, can I just ask a quick question before? If we sign off on a conservation restriction now, does that preclude us from getting any assistance from the trustees or the Greenbelt?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Nope.
Thank you.
So just a quick overview of the
Wait,
conservation.
so we're not signing off, we're not voting on this tonight.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
I just
clear,
want to know for future.
Yeah, no, that's,
I wanted to see if we can get assistance from them.
okay, sorry, Pete.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So just for clarification, a conservation restriction, the intent of a conservation restriction is there to impose and secure land and make sure that it is kept in a way that the intended purpose is. So in this particular one, our conservation restriction, the purpose is to protect the property as well as allow for passive, non-active use of that property, but to keep it in its natural state. And there are, under MGL, essentially two methods of conservation restrictions. There is a general conservation restriction that you can develop under Chapter 184, Section 27, which essentially allows you to put that conservation restriction on the land. Conservation restriction can be placed by a private entity or a public entity, generally by the owner. We are the public representation and owner of that property, and therefore the town can put the conservation restriction on. In the 184, Section 27, it's limited in the length of time that protection can exist. By chapter, it is, or by law, it's 30 years, meaning that the conservation restriction has to be renewed. Means that somebody has to remember that it needs to be renewed, and you have to go through a process of recording notice to renew that restriction. It then also means that it can be revised based on the changing whims of whoever may be in control at that particular time. The preferred methodology, however, is in perpetuity, meaning that the conservation restriction stands against the property in many years, however long is necessary, but there is no time limitation essentially under perpetuity. And that's under Chapter 184, Section 32. Under that particular allowance, the Commonwealth stipulates that the conservation restriction does require certain limitations and elements within that restriction. But by doing so, it doesn't require any recertification, notification, and it also ensures that the changing whims of the property owner, such as a changing board or a changing governmental structure, cannot then affect that conservation restriction. In order to do that, you have to utilize a model conservation restriction that was developed by the Secretary of Environmental Affairs. This particular draft that I've provided to you does utilize the conservation restriction model. I've provided you both a red line version because in the review process that is required, you have to provide red line so that they can determine what you struck out, what you modified outside of that model. That model does explicitly state what areas can be removed, what areas you need to fill in. Certain areas don't apply for certain communities because of where that particular property is located. And so I provided both versions here. The other difference in the two methodologies is that in order to allow for a conservation restriction in perpetuity, the owner and the steward, a steward essentially is the entity that oversees that restriction in order to ensure that the restriction stays solid, that there is no violation of that restriction. For a perpetuity purpose, the owner and the steward have to be separate. Otherwise, you will have a conflict there. If the owner is also the steward, the owner then could be lax on its stewardship. You need an outside entity. Therefore, in our particular case, the town of Swampscott being the owner cannot have a steward that is also a creation of the town. Therefore, a commission or a board cannot be a steward. So this particular draft contemplates utilizing the Essex County Land Trust, otherwise known as Greenbelt, as the outside land stewardship. The Essex County Land Trust has protections and is stewards of property throughout Essex County. They've already reviewed the property. The board has already agreed that if the town does want to select them as their stewards, they are happy to be the stewards of the property. They already are established. They know the process and procedure in order to deal with, let's say, encumbrances by neighboring property owners, or where the property owner itself creates violations. They know how to handle those particular situations, and they would be able to assist us with that. The stewards are not the caretakers. They are simply there to ensure that you do not violate. Therefore, the town still has the ability to take care of that property and the responsibility as well. So what you've been provided tonight is the initial draft. Essentially what we'll need to do is, also town council has been provided this. I would like any comments or feedback, feel free to email at me at any time. This is a lengthy document. But I'm happy to answer particular questions, whether it be tonight or afterwards. We can go through any of those particular things. Happy to meet with anybody. But we would want town council to review that. Once town council has reviewed the draft document, I want the select board to then review it. If the board also agrees with Greenbelt as the stewards, we would want the Greenbelt to also review the document, make sure that everybody is in agreement on the actual language of the conservation restriction. Once that conservation restriction is approved by both the steward and the select board, it then has to be submitted to the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs. They then will review what we have proposed as a conservation restriction. It's difficult to say how long that review process is. It could be 6 months, could be more or less. It depends on how many other restrictions are in process. It also depends on how much you modified the model language. But then once it is approved, that is then signed by the secretary, and then it gets recorded, and then the property is protected. And the steward then takes over as land steward or stewards of the conservation restriction. But I'm happy to answer any questions if you happen to review anything, or if you just have any general questions about process and procedure.
Can you speak to the timeline on closing the acquisition?
Sure.
Like where we are on that?
So one half of the property, the northwest property, the 5 acres on the northwest side, has already closed. That's already been recorded. Town has title to that property. The southwest or southeast portion, the other 5 acres, will be, the final recording documents should be recorded tomorrow, at which time the payment will also be released. So the ownership should be completed by the end of this week for both portions.
So we could potentially be approving the conservation restriction as soon as our next meeting or sometime shortly after that.
Absolutely, yes.
But even if we do that, we're looking at
Yeah, there's
6 to 9 months probably of just time.
And also, just for clarity too, although one portion of Archer Street did close in, I want to say October, may have been November. The proposed stewards, Greenbelt, advised that it's best to do the conservation restriction once all of the property is owned, so that you're not going through the process twice with the Commonwealth. Although the restriction may be the same, it still would be handled differently because they are essentially 2 separate properties, and so we would have to go through the process all over again. It's also just easier for any steward to understand what the full breadth of the property is, rather than looking at them as 2 different pieces. So that's why it wasn't brought forward and why we didn't move on the other piece, because it just didn't make sense until we had everything in place.
Is this restriction including the parcel that was gifted that it was just in our last special town meeting?
It does not, but it can absolutely be included in there. Yes, that's a good question. And that's the Park Square lot that's Neil's referring to.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if we wanted to include it. I'm curious.
Yeah, I haven't actually done a field review of that particular property. I don't know what has happened over the years, if anything has happened. It is adjacent to what was a paper street, or essentially, but there are neighboring properties. It does allow us access, but I don't know that it necessarily needs the conservation restriction per se, but we can definitely look at it.
Okay.
Are there any mechanisms to get any type of funding for what we just bought?
Yeah, so a lot of times when it comes to different park grants, let's say specifically the PARC grant through the Commonwealth, they actually do require that a conservation restriction of some type is placed on a property as part of the grant process. If we already have it in place, we would be able to alleviate that one step, and it demonstrates that the community is already invested in preserving that property, and therefore we don't need to go through that, but we've now are looking for monies for, let's say, signage or a trail clearing, something like that. But yeah, it does assist with it.
Because I'm just wondering, if I'm the organization that gives out grant funding, and you already have a conservation easement on the property, what motivates me to give any money to try to secure to make sure this stays in conservation? So I'm just wondering,
Well,
should we not put it into conservation and try to get,
Yeah.
just for temporarily not put into conservation and apply for monies? This might be totally crazy, but I apply for monies so that we can lock it into conservation. Does that give us any type of leverage?
Absolutely not. So the reason being is, if you don't put it in under conservation restriction, you decide to hold off, there's no benefit to it. There's absolutely no benefit to it. Putting the conservation restriction actually identifies to the grantees, the grantors, sorry, what you intend to do with the property, that it's not an open book of, well, we can do whatever we want, because we know how we want to protect it. If you are applying for grants, those grants do dictate what you're applying for, what the use of the funds are going to be for. We would only apply for grants that are directly related to what we want to achieve through our conservation.
Oh, I'm looking for a grant that'll help reimburse us for purchasing the property to keep it in conservation.
Most grants, you cannot seek funding once you've already purchased the property. It has to be prior to any closing, that they need to be part of that process, but you can't seek reimbursement. Most of them you cannot. It's definitely from Commonwealth, you can't do a reimbursement requests.
Okay.
You can for things like maintenance or any capital improvement type thing, but the actual land acquisition, you would have to do that prior to the acquisition.
Is there a fee for the stewardship?
So the Greenbelt does ask for, but it does not require. I've already asked that of them. They would not require us. They are happy to accept it because obviously there is administrative costs in order to admin and steward over a property, especially legal, but there is no requirement.
Okay. Is the request like an annual fee or based on their participation in the property? Like,
That's a good question too. So there are a number of land trusts that do both the initial and ongoing annuals. Greenbelt only ever does initial, and the request is only at the initial, but again, it's not a requirement.
Okay.
But they are not one that does an annual request.
okay.
Pete, can you make sure that the restriction incorporates the idea of us setting aside areas in which residents could park so that they could have access to walk the trails? I do see some language here. I just want to make sure it's expressly flushed out.
Sure.
You know, not unlike the Harold King Forest and other areas where there are areas, again, maybe it's on surrounding roadways or however
Right.
it's done, just to, I would hate for us to feel as though we were, Harold King Park's a great example where there's literally designated parking spaces. Like it's a welcome mat, if you will, to the community there. I think something more akin to that is much more what I'm thinking compared to the parking, which I don't even think exists on Little's Point Road for the easement.
Right.
Right.
Marion Court, White Court, which makes people feel as though they're trespassing, right? And I just want to make sure that we make it so that, again, none of these get huge amount of traffic, so it's not like we're introducing a lot of traffic here, but to allow someone that lives more than walking distance away to utilize these walking areas and park. So
Yeah.
we could just make sure that we're going to have that flexibility.
Yep, yeah, I can check with council and make sure that
Great.
we have that in here.
Thank you.
Harold King thankfully had the right-of-way of Nichols Road that we were able to utilize, but we can certainly look at making sure. And I believe there is some language in here that restricts the use of asphalt, but does allow for crushed stone.
Great, thank you.
So if we're delving into the details of these two versions, version 2, the one that goes to EOEA, is the one that you're recommending that we're doing because that's in perpetuity. So that's what we should really be
Correct.
looking at, right?
Yeah, these documents are the same
Yeah.
that I provided. One's the red line version,
Right.
one's the clean version, so
Right.
that it's easier to read, yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, method 2 is definitely the preferred method.
Okay.
Or the recommended method.
Do we have any land in town that follows the first method? Has a concept?
Under the first method?
Yeah.
Yes. The land that we have that falls essentially under that first method predated this restriction, however. So a number of our lands that were acquired in the 60s, specifically Harold King Forest, Ewing Woods, Lynn Scott Park, those are properties where the town owns it and the Conservation Commission is the steward. Because they predated the restriction, the perpetuity is still valid.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So they essentially fall into the second parameter, even though they
Yeah,
were under the
it's
first.
because of the change in the
Yep.
law, yep.
Understood.
Yeah.
So there's no upkeep to make sure the conservation.
There's no requirement for re-notification,
Right, okay.
correct, yep.
Any other questions for Pete? I'll just mention too that the Swampscott Conservancy reached out and has offered their services to help blaze trails and
Which would absolutely fit within it because Greenbelt would be the stewards, they're not the caretakers of the
Right.
town or any agents that it wants to work with, such as the Conservancy, or even like the Boys and Girls clubs could certainly be part of that process of maintaining and enjoying the property.
right. So yeah, just certainly appreciate that offer they made, and I'm sure the town will take them up on that for sure.
But if any board member has any feedback that you want to email to me at any point over the next week or so, I'm happy to take any of that feedback or even answer any questions as well.
you.
Thanks, Pete. I appreciate the memo and all the information.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
All right, moving on. Next item is discussion of Select Board and Town Administrators 2023 goals. We talked about this briefly before the holidays. Last year, the Select Board set some goals, and individual members talked about goals that they were setting as more sort of individual initiatives that they were interested in doing, but also the board sort of settled on some big picture goals. And then Sean also is setting some goals, which I think fall into those categories as well, of sort of big picture town-wide goals, as well as operational goals that he's looking into. He's shared a draft list with us just before this meeting. So, you know, we've got this list now. We certainly can discuss goals, our goals, and the town administrator's goals tonight, and then, you know, take up whatever we want to take up at the next meeting if we're not ready to approve anything officially. I'm happy to. Do you guys have a preference of starting with town administrator goals or select board goals? Okay.
The only question that I have is just like a timeline on goals, because we're asked to evaluate the town administrator from July 1 to the end of June, correct? For him to attain his bonus.
Yeah.
All right, so, and now, so we're sitting in January, so now there's so he's got 6 months now to attain his full bonus, and we have to decide on what the goals are. So some of the questions that I have, or the concerns I have, is setting a time for the select board to actually have goals in place so that the town administrator has 12 months to attain his or her goals.
Yeah, so I think that a couple of things. I think I'd rather not start talking about timelines before we've actually, I think, talked about the goals themselves, because I don't know. I think different goals have different timelines, right? I think a lot of goals that we set and that the town administrator is going to be setting, timelines are hard. You know, I think that certain actions, we can talk about, like, what are some actions that need to be taken to get towards that goal. But you know, when you're trying to, for instance, if a goal is to, you know, further the cleanup of Kings Beach and get a project going on Kings Beach cleanup, like, there are a lot of things that are not within anyone's control that affect that. So to say, like, you know, Sean's goal is to clean up Kings Beach by the end of 2023, and his bonus is based on that idea, is something that I think is too rigid and
Right.
specific.
I just want clarity so that,
Yeah.
so, because this has to do with Sean's compensation, so
Yep.
I don't want to leave, I just want to have.
I actually,
things as-
you know, I think it has more to do with the trajectory of the town. I do think, like, if you want to talk about my compensation, we can set up an agenda item that, you know, can focus on that. But for me, this is a conversation about the town and the select board and how we work together to achieve all of the things that are critically important. We have a lot of goals that we're currently working on. We have a lot of goals that perhaps we should prioritize.
Okay,
And
for me,
for me, that's the crux of this discussion tonight.
all right, so for me, I want to know because the town administrator's compensation is set up by attaining goals. And I just want to know, now there's only a 6-month window. I just want to make sure that everything is as fair as possible
Sure.
to be able to attain those goals. I just need things to be a little bit more literal. And I do like timelines so that things are pretty clear.
Yeah, I don't have anything against timelines. I'm
Right.
just saying they tend to move, and I don't think that's necessarily a reflection of performance. You
Well,
understand? Does that?
I think what you're both saying makes sense. However, the one way to ensure that timelines are met is to to have longer time. And so in this example, Mary Ellen is saying Sean only has 6 months to look towards some of these goals before we're evaluating him again. Wouldn't it be better if he had a year?
Or just, I don't want to, if there's, I haven't even read these, right, because we just got them. So I don't want to have this big goals, then all of a sudden June comes and I'm being asked to evaluate somebody and the goals haven't been able to be attained. Or I'm just trying to make sure that there's fair opportunity to attain 100% of your compensation for your goals.
But, I mean, at the same time, I just want to make sure that that we have the town administrator, we're not hamstringing the town administrator. I want him to dream big. I want him to look at and tackle these issues that are going to set the course of our town for the next, for not only the next year or 5 years, but 10 years and 20 years and 50 years. And looking at this, I mean, the professional development, I mean, that's something that you can, that's something that's quantitative and certainly can be addressed. We can look at, the communications and community engagement. That's something that you can look at. Ongoing investments in public facilities and town properties. I mean, that's more of a long-term focus. Supporting and promoting affordable housing development. That's longer term. Improvement in town finance. That's in the shorter term. Climate resiliency efforts. I don't think we're going to be able to tackle that problem, in the next 6 months, but we can certainly make good progress on it. So I sort of think these can come into multiple buckets here.
Right.
Where you're looking
I would agree. I agree with you, yeah. They can, absolutely multiple buckets. That's why I'm saying maybe,
Put them in the buckets.
put them in the buckets and then we're just a little
I
clearer.
also think, there's short term and long term, and so
Right, that's
some of these
Exactly what we're saying.
what I just said.
goals we got to just look at and say, all right,
Exactly.
what's meaningful
All right.
progress?
Put that on a goal.
What's not potentially saying that you've accomplished the goal, but made some really significant progress with it.
So my question, I guess, is different from Mary Ellen's, which is why don't we do this in July?
Or
Why didn't we?
before-
Why don't we? Why don't we?
Oh, we
do it-
should have done it earlier. We're late.
Okay. I'm sorry. My apologies.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should be doing it like May for the following July or something like.
I
So,
just think the timing is.
so you have calendar year or fiscal year, right? Those are
Right.
the two obvious choices for us to do, right? And so we feel like we're on a fiscal year, but maybe what people are saying, maybe we want to be on a calendar year. And then there's election cycles too, right? Which throws a third thing into this. So I think what Neil is trying to say, which is before you do the overlay of looking at the goals as a judging criteria, just look at the goals purely as what does the town need?
Right.
And what do we believe the town needs? Once we get that, then I think I hear him, it's easier, once we just altruistically, you're right, the goals do serve multiple functions, but the most important, the paramount one is, what's good for the town and what do we think we should be pursuing for the town? And then I think we can talk about it. I do believe that we need to shift the review period for the town administrator, because I believe it's off where it should be. So I agree in general terms with the fact that I think adjusting that is helpful to allow things to happen in a more timely, in its more appropriate place, both for new members of the board, but also just in terms of natural cycles. But I think Neil's just suggesting before we inadvertently corrupt the goal process, it's totally inadvertent. Let's just look at the altruism of things, because what we wouldn't want is the town administrator also just to focus his goals in ways that focus on what he thinks he can do just for compensation purposes. So the altruism goes both ways here. And so I think we're all saying
Yes.
variations of the same thing here, which is ignore the town administrator a little bit right now. We have to get back to it to have that conversation, to wrap this all up. But right now, let's talk about where do we think in the next 12 months for short term and longer for long term that we think our individual, collective, and town administrator efforts should be. Is that, Neil, if I did a disservice to your position?
No, I agree. I mean, I think everyone's saying very similar things.
Yes.
So that was my point, is don't set a timeline on something we haven't even decided about yet. So I think that, why don't we shift a little and talk about just town goals and our goals. I have, especially since I appreciate the specificity on this list, and thank you, Sean, for putting this together. I think everyone, to be fair, probably wants to take a little time to read through it. I don't think there's anything that anyone would be, necessarily against on this list, but we can sort of think about priorities and where we want to see focus. So I would say for me, my focus looking into this year, if you will, is similar to what it was last year, which is development and completion of a climate action plan for the town. We have to figure out what we're doing with ARPA funds. We will be starting in a couple weeks the process of the Hawthorne. So the Hawthorne and the Hadley are priorities for me to get a better idea of what we're doing with those properties and what the steps are. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff, but that for me is like those are the big picture priorities, and I actually don't think we need a lot more to be doing right now. We have a lot going on, so that's where I sit and when I think about what I feel is important.
So I had two of those also on my list, the Hadley and the Hawthorne acquisition, and sort of revisiting Hadley since the Hawthorne acquisition, because we may have a different outlook on Hadley now that we own Hawthorne, or maybe the thoughts are evolving because of this very close, large space that we've acquired, and the opportunities are sort of different there. And then also I had just some community engagement initiatives that I'm trying to weave folks who are unengaged or less engaged into these types of conversations, and how we go about doing that, and how we sort of add to our script instead of flip it, and get more folks who aren't involved, or folks who were involved and then fell out of involvement, and trying to re-engage them back into the community, because to me that's the heart of how we prevent things like we discussed this at the beginning of the meeting, and other items from occurring is, better education and understanding, and civic mindedness and pride in the things that we do here, and that our committees and boards do every single day. Getting people to understand that more, and that's really abstract, Mary Ellen, so I apologize.
That's all right.
But as it flushes out more, there are concrete ways to do it. I just haven't gotten there yet.
That's great. Thanks.
Sure, I have a few. A number of the goals that I had, when I ran in 2020 were, around infrastructure and acquisition of open space, and we've accomplished some of those infrastructure goals with a new elementary school, and we've accomplished acquisition of open space most recently with the Archer Street acquisitions, and that's certainly exciting. We still have more infrastructure to go. Most notably is really the substantial infrastructure investment to clean up Kings Beach. We need to address this long-standing environmental justice issue within our region. We need to continue to work not only to address affordable housing initiatives within the town, but also address public housing improvements within our town. Regarding our public housing, what we have is so woefully insufficient. It's not ADA compliant, and we owe much more to our residents. These are Swampscott residents, and we need to do more. We need to do better. And Sean, I want that to be a goal of the board and us and you to really work to improve that. I also think we need to better address the needs of our seniors and improve our funding for the senior center and senior center personnel. We have a graying population, and funding is just insufficient. the growing population of seniors. And, you know, many seniors have never even set foot in the senior center. So in my opinion, the town needs to do a better job of engaging and interacting with our senior community and really having something that we can be proud of and really support that cohort. We need more investment in veterans and veteran services. I'd like to see veteran senior housing or veterans affordable housing in Swampscott, as well as a revamped VFW, an investment in a physical structure that can provide, you know, increased services to our veterans community. I look forward to working with the Veterans Crossing and actively listening to bringing their ideas to the forefront of what I believe is a most important conversation. I look forward to working with the Rec Commission to explore additional opportunities for no-cost and low-cost events and continue to invest. We need to continue to invest in programming, not only for kids, but for adults and for seniors, with new ideas and concepts, bringing excitement and a full calendar of robust events in town. And last but certainly not least, I want to continue to build community through community events, both adult and family-friendly offerings, and work with large stakeholder groups, such as the Veterans Crossing, such as the Rec Commission, such as our elementary school PTOs, local businesses, and other organizations in town that can provide the people power and the marketing support for these large-scale events. And I think we can certainly accomplish all of these in the next, you know, we can accomplish most of these in the next 12 months. And some of these are longer-term goals, but these are the 6 things that I'm most excited about working for over the next year.
So I'll go next. Some of the concerns that I put down in the goals that are important to me, and I really looked at over the next 6 months, only because to the end of the year, to staying up front with staying in line with our financial goals, and to communicate what's going on financially in a much better way than what we're doing right now. I want to see a full plan on what our finances are looking like, get our quarterlies up, even our monthlies up. I would really like to have all this financial stuff ready to go for town meeting a month before town meeting, so people can understand it, look at it, and we can go to town meeting and just be done with it. It's disturbing to me that we hand things out at the last minute and people don't get a chance to really digest it. So I'd like it a little bit earlier. I even think that in the charter, it's either a charter or bylaw, I think we're supposed to review things on November 15th. Am I wrong on that date? I don't think I'm wrong on that date. November 15th sticks out that we're supposed to review finances. So I'd like to get back to what we do in the charter and just keep the finances front and center, because I do think you do a great job with that. And I want to keep that number 1 at all times. I'm glad that we have the website on your list here, because that is a great opportunity for us to improve communications within this town. I use the website to find out what's going on constantly, and let's leave it that there's great opportunity to add things on there. The capital plan, that's another thing I want to make sure that that's up front and out there. I'd like to see a better job with all of the boards, as far as boards getting information out there and working together. One really important thing to me is the loss of commercial property. And year after year, I hear how we lose commercial property, we're losing commercial property, and I'd like to get a bylaw set. I think there was a bylaw that was proposed by the planning board in 2021 to limit the loss of commercial planning. So I'd like to revisit that and see what we need to do. I'd like to see what we have to do to reevaluate and work with businesses and constituents in Salem to deal with the property over there by Glover, as far as getting it better prepared for pedestrian, bicycles, and anyone else that's going to be using that area. I think Vinnon Square has so much opportunity, especially with 3A, for senior housing, veterans housing, senior low-income housing, that we need to start talking to the developers and the people that own that property now. and not wait much longer, but just to start getting a plan in. And then long-term, moving into a future vision of Vinnen Square. So I'm very focused on the Vinnen Square thing. So those were my short terms that I thought were real important to look at right now. Oh, and then the one thing is, 30% of our population is over 55. And I really think that our budget needs to reflect more money into what's going on in the senior center. I am disappointed that we don't have a kitchen up there going yet, and I'm hoping that that's going to be taken care of pretty soon. We've got the funding. We have $100,000 that was bonded, and I'd like to start seeing that kitchen so that they could start making meals and make it more of a community environment and not just a senior center. I think that if we build it, they will come. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Mary Ellen.
You're welcome, Neil.
Go the distance.
Peter?
Thanks, Neil. I mean, I'm going to keep mine really brief because I agree with so many of the things that people have talked about. But in terms of my own personal focus, today I was talking to someone, and what keeps me up at night about the town is the budget. So I think our fundamentals, we have corrected so many things, but I think there are things that have happened recently that are really concerning trajectories. And some I think were unnecessary changes in trajectory. Some I think are just absolutely just necessary. But I think the town administrator and the school department just finished doing lots of contracts, and the three largest contracts all contain costs that I don't think are sustainable. The school department and our public safety at our current levels. If this is a new trajectory, then there is no way we maintain services as they exist today, never mind introduce the righteous things that David and Mary Ellen just talked about relative to the senior center, right? I agree. I think as though we are totally underinvested there, but the solution is unfortunately complicated because it's not like we have money sitting around. So we've got to figure out how to keep the strictures we have in place, which again, the current financial team and the committees have, and this board deserve a lot of credit for getting us here, but it's so easy to let go of it. It's really so. That is, to me, a place that that vigilance needs to happen. And Mary Ellen mentioned about talking about and communicating about our finances. This is why it's so important to do so. There's many reasons, right? Transparency in and of itself, but really so people understand the choices that we are faced with, and that ultimately they'll be faced with by virtue of budgetary concerns, right? We all would spend infinite amount on many different things we just talked about if we had infinite amounts, but we know that they are choices that we have to make, and dollars can only go to one place, not two places. And so we're having to make choices with limited amount of dollars. And so as we continue to invest in just those things that we've always invested in, then we're making a choice about the dollars that doesn't leave a lot towards the places that we've underinvested, and human services is top of the list, right? Sean, I appreciate your focus on health, public health. You have, although it's still not a lot, we have, significantly increased the senior center budget. You have, attempted to assist the library in doing things, but the human services side of our government platform is lacking, right? And we're not unlike so many communities, but I think we have created the framework that I think we can do these things if we're willing to have the tough conversations about the choices we need to make as a community. And I think that comes back to communication. Let people understand where we are, why we think we are where we are. Let's have the healthy debate about that, and then people then can come to their conclusions about what they think we should be doing. For me, I think I'm going to go back to where I started when I started on this board, which was a lot of empty buildings. And my biggest fear is that we end up with empty buildings again. And so Hadley and Hawthorne are certainly on the top of my list. Hawthorne will be empty as soon as Halloween of this year. I think on the 28th, when we're having the idea exchange for the Hawthorne, there's going to be a conversation about short-term uses as well. It's not just long-term, because we are going to have a short-term gap that we've got to decide what we want to do with that property. And I'm excited about that, because I think that's really important, that we do something that's community appropriate, that is temporary in nature, but you know, doesn't, we can't become the biggest blighted property owner in Swampscott. And then that takes me to Hadley, which is, as much as you go by Hadley today, and the new school site at Sandley, and you see them moving dirt, and it feels really early in the process. June 24th, 2024 is the anticipated certificate of occupancy date.
Is that
for
still the date?
The new school. So that date is, it might as well be here.
Yep.
Now. That's how soon that date is. It's remarkable how quick this goes. And people are going to be shocked at how quickly you're going to see steel structure up. You're going to be shocked at how quickly you're going to see the building enclosed. It's now. And Hadley has to advance in a conversation, or else we are looking at a prolonged period of time of Hadley being empty. We were lucky and we could salvage the Mashon and do something remarkable at the Mashon, because it hadn't fallen into as gross disrepair as Greenwood Middle School did. But Greenwood Middle School, between the water infusion and mold and damage, you know, kind of predestined some things, some choices that we had to make there. And so for me, and I think where some of my strengths are, allow me to focus on those and help those projects get to a point where we minimize the threat of them being empty, in addition to the fact that they are just incredible community building opportunities for us, and address so many things, the topics that you all are passionate about, and we might be able to do several things with them. And then last but not least is I've really appreciated David's, not singular focus, since he just literally listed 22 things, but David, on the top of David's list every single time he talks, is affordable housing. And he's incredibly passionate about it, and he's really focused on it, and I want to complement and supplement that effort using some of my strengths to be able to do it, because I'm very proud of the Mashon and our ability to solve that building creatively there, but there are a lot more ideas. There really is. And so I think that I'm pleased with David's focus on that, and I want to complement that and the Affordable Housing Trust, and also acknowledge that I believe Charlie Patsios was recently appointed by the governor to join the Housing Authority, and I think that's a great addition, and I stand ready to work with Charlie and the Housing Authority to address what just has been a growing need due to a lack of state funding for the Housing Authority. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Sean, I think some of the things that we mentioned are on the list that you provided to us. I don't think you need to read your list, but I don't know if you've heard, you know, if there's anything that you're thinking about.
No, I think it's helpful. I think, you know, what I think would be helpful is for me to go back and take the goals that the board has shared and merge it with some of these goals. You know, what was important for me about this conversation is how we prioritize. We have a lot of ongoing projects. We've got to continue, you know, the work on advancing a lot of those initiatives, but we do have some other priorities, and it's important for us to support each other and just try to find that right balance. I think we can spend some time over the next week thinking again about, you know, what does the timeline look like? What does it make sense? How does it make sense in terms of, you know, establishing key criteria or milestones that are benchmarks for each of these initiatives, and we can finalize this and just get busy, you know, keeping the town on a very productive agenda.
Okay.
I think it would be great if, Sean, you can hear this, but also there's so many things that we didn't talk about that, frankly, if we didn't talk about them, no one would even know they existed. Extensions of Lynn Sewer contract, things that I know you worry about, because when we talk to you, oftentimes we're not talking about these big, glowing things. We talk about community growth and opportunities and community building opportunities, and we talk about, infrastructure, and we talk about these things, but you and your team, day in and day out, are working on kind of brass tacks on things, contracts, legal things, technical things, complicated things that
Rail trail.
if we didn't say the words, people wouldn't even know that needs to happen. But those are core functioning things that you see, you have articulated in the future are, look at, these are freight trains coming at us. We have to deal with it. It's 5, 10, 15 years down, but we don't have that amount of time to work on them. So for you to then overlay what you see as things, never mind what we all said, and again, I know there's a divergence of view here as to how this works here, but I really firmly believe that you need to overlay on our ideals and things that we want, some practical realities of what needs to happen for the mechanics of town government, because you see it more than anybody else, and what needs to be, what is it that we're not even smart enough to know to be thinking about, or we're just not thinking about it because we don't care to think about it. So I just look to you to kind of give that to us, because that's a dose of medicine as well that we need to understand.
Most significant is what you don't see, and it's what, keeps me up at night. It's your water and sewer pipes. It's that status of good repair. It's connected in part to Kings Beach, but it really is a shoe that could drop. We received some grant funding to do an assessment of the entire town's infrastructure, and so we're going to get some information that will continue to help us, understand what that status of good repair is.
Well, is that assessment, we got that grant a year or two ago? And that assessment, when is that assessment going to be completed?
Probably in the next 60 to 90 days.
Is Kleinfelder doing that?
Kleinfelder is working on that.
Okay.
Again, doing that assessment's going to inform us and help us plan work and, apply for grant funding. I do think, again, we've touched base on the budget, but I can't understate, what Peter had shared about the budget. I think the more work we've done to try to help strengthen Swampscott's financial stability, I think the more work is going to be required, because we've started to balance the broader needs of the town, and when you do that, it helps you understand that you've underinvested in so many other areas for so long that you've got to continue to find ways to support these initiatives. It's not just our seniors or the library. It's the civic life. We talked earlier tonight about our responsibility to build community. It's not just about anti-Semitism. It's about addressing loneliness. It's about addressing social isolation, all the things that, become the fertile ground for hate or for dystopian, elements of society. We've done a good job with that, but we've got to keep up with that. I think, what I see is, the need for more of that. Those type of community events and programs take a lot of bandwidth. We're a small town. We don't have dozens and dozens of staff that are available to support all of these things. And so most of that work is done in large part by select board members and volunteers and others. So when we set these goals, I think it's important that we also recognize that busy town has an impact on all of the boards and commissions and community members. But look, it's worth doing and it's worth celebrating. I think we've really enjoyed a sense of success over the last year, with some projects that came together because of the work we did over the last few years, and I think there's every reason to believe that we can do some extraordinary things, but it's going to take a lot of work. I do think it would be important for us to add those projects, Peter, and list things that if we stopped working on today, what would happen? And some of those projects are existing capital. I look at the existing list of capital projects. When we look at the goals, we probably should look at that list and try to figure out of the projects that are on our capital improvement plan and our capital improvement appropriations, how do we prioritize those, and which are more important than others? Because there may be things that need to be prioritized if we expect them to be accomplished over the next 6 months or 12 months, as opposed to.
Well, I'm dying to know, why do we put things on the capital plan and approve things for capital, and yet we don't make them happen?
Well, what specific things?
Are at the fire station, to make sure that we have a locker room, a changing area for female firefighters. Now, they have an area that's
Yep,
very adequate.
I've met with the fire chief and our facilities department this week to help coordinate those. So we're working on those.
But the answer's broader, though. The answer's broader, Mary Ellen, which is we don't have project management teams in town. We just don't. And just candidly, I mean, I sit and watch. I sit and watch what they're doing. We have a facilities director who's quite literally in charge of a new school being built right now. In addition to the 8 buildings that in the school department and whatever 4 buildings here.
Yep.
We have a DPW director who is capable of doing the stuff, but also is running a DPW. We have a fire chief who's capable of doing things, but also running a fire department. So we don't. It's the true lack of project management in towns that all towns suffer from, the ability to execute projects. And we don't, and we've talked about it, we don't capitalize, because mass law limits the amount that you can capitalize project management assistance when we're approving capital projects. I firmly believe that we can, to a certain degree, factor in, if we're doing a project, then who's going to run that project?
Can you factor in the school?
So we can factor in certain things into the bonding, and I believe we started a conversation with the former treasurer who was here, and it didn't go anywhere with the former treasurer. Maybe we'll get somewhere with the current
It did go somewhere, yeah, and in fact.
We didn't come to conclusion, I should say. Understood. And so I think there's a percentage actually of cost that we are actually able to allocate as an admin cost in a capital project and still have it qualify under the bond, and we should be looking at that because it is short money.
Right.
By way of example, we have a consultant who's been working with us on several grant applications, a woman that used to work for the town, who, she gets paid by virtue of that, and it's remarkable, like what we're able to do by having that extra set of hands. And so your point's a valid point, but it's not for lack of people's focus. Sometimes projects just fall through because they weren't spec'd right or pricing wrong.
Right.
But I think, and I agree with the frustration, like I wanted to know, why did it take over 2.5 years to get body cameras in activity? Because we actually used our bond authorization 2.5 years ago for that.
Right.
Took 2.5 years for cameras.
Right. So this is that.
But that was because it took
Impact bargain.
a long time for negotiations with the union to finish. It took a long time for regulations to happen and things of that nature. 2.5 years after we voted, it took that. But it wasn't because of lack of effort. It's just because there's complex things. So I would really hope that we can look at that administrative charge. Let's find a way to bring on those consultants to help us finish projects, because there's not enough hours in the day for your project management. And you guys know that. And it's my constant criticism all the time on that. Like, I'm with you on that. But it's I don't know who the person is, and then a lot of us have filled roles, and committee members have filled roles doing that, but that's also not a sustainable way of doing things either. And so, get it done.
And keep the budget from growing for more than 2.5%, and
Yeah, that too.
and keep taxes steady, and again, I'm not looking to underplay just the importance of finding individuals to help us. I think we've proven that we can be creative. We do need project management. We have a facilities director. We have an assistant facilities director that I met with today to really talk about the fire department. We are working on the kitchen at the senior center. We had to go out to rebid. Some projects are taking longer because of the marketplace and because of some of the costs associated with improvements. And so I think, not to provide excuses, but we're dealing with an economy that is complicated, and it's making projects a little bit more complicated. That said, we do pride ourselves on clipping off projects and keeping moving, and we've, I think, had an extraordinary track record with getting grants and getting funding and moving forward with improving parks and places and spaces. So we will continue that focus, and we'll continue to look to individuals to help us accomplish,
Well, maybe we could
the agenda.
look at every project and see what is it really gonna take? And if we can turn around and just look at it in detail versus globalizing it, because, what we're doing is we're appropriating capital funds, and yet we don't have a mechanism on how we're gonna implement it within a specific time frame.
Generally, look, we're building a school.
I understand we're building a school, but we have our facilities director working on building this new school, and if we can
He's
turn around and
working
get
on
funding.
15 other projects as well. He's updating green renewable projects for buildings. He's, maintaining facilities. He's managing contracts. I mean, there's so many things. There's not a day that goes by that he isn't just.
I don't think it's a criticism of Max. I just think it's
Yes,
like
not-
let's just put pen to paper, see what's open on the docket, and then how can we move the projects forward? Or at least just communicate that you can't, and then people don't have, you're managing expectations.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair question. I don't know that it's one that's been explicitly asked of department heads in particular. When they meet with CIC and they meet with you and they're saying, these are the capital projects and these are what's coming up next or whatever, for them to affirmatively be able to say, and this is the action plan of how we get it done, and to acknowledge that they can't just because of just some physical realities, it's just important. It doesn't mean it won't get done. It means, okay, and then let's decide consciously to put more resources to it to get it done.
Right.
Or maybe this year, if it can wait a year, it will wait until next year, because next year you'll be able to do it. And so some of that, I think maybe just having that explicit conversation is a really fair conversation, and fair to the staff as well, because then gives them an opportunity to just say, look, I would love to get this done. I can't get this done unless you give me more help. And,
Yeah, I mean,
and then we deal with it.
that's a hard position to put staff in too, though.
Yeah, but department heads,
Then they're
but department
coming-
heads
like
do
they're
need to
coming
be.
across as-
Yeah, but department heads do have to be in that position, though. They can't advocate at the same time and propose a budget
I
which
know.
they then can't
It's
execute.
just still,
No, but we've got to, but it's fair for the town administrator to ask for, I think, department heads to say, if you're asking for it and you say you can do it, the expectation is you're going to be able to do it. Right? But if not, that's okay. It's not a bad thing. We'll help you. We'll find other resources, or we'll decide to wait a year. But the worst case scenario is another project doesn't happen because we've encumbered $80,000, and it takes 2.5 years for something to happen. When there was other projects, I guarantee you, we could have found plenty of places for $80,000.
yeah, but I mean, again, we don't have to go through the list, but, you have a project that goes out to bid, and all the bids come back, and they're tens of thousands of dollars over, you have to go out to, you can't do the project.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
that's the system.
Yeah, so that's one example of one particular thing.
Sure.
My example of the fire department was, that's money that's been approved a few years ago, and it hasn't been implemented yet. So that's where
Right.
my example came from. The example of the kitchen, that would be what you just brought up, is that it went out to bid, it came back,
Right.
and then Sean wants it to go back out to bid in a specific way to try to align it with what we can get.
Yeah. Again, I hear what you are saying. I think we can go back, take a look at each of the capital projects, get a sense of, where we are and how we can all feel comfortable that when we set these goals, they are going to align with our existing array of projects, and we can have a
Right.
frank conversation about each of the projects and get a sense of how we all prioritize the time that we have, and if we really do need to apply some additional strategies or funds to a few of the initiatives to help ensure that they can get done within a timeline that, frankly, the board expects, we can have that discussion.
So I think, to be continued, the conversation, I think what we heard, from the board is there's certainly communication and engagement, a real sharpened focus on the budget. I think, Vin and Square redevelopment, commercial redevelopment, which Sean, you've mentioned to me in our conversations and is on your list, Hawthorne and Hadley, and ARPA and housing. I mean, that's a list.
When I'm talking about Vin and Square, I'm with the focus on housing, that implementing it into a 3A district, working with the planning board, so that we can
Right.
get.
Yeah, no,
That
yeah, but I think generally also just
Yep.
some sort of starting the planning process
Right,
to look at that. And I think that 3A, you know, requirement is going to kick that off for sure. So I think that, you know, providing a refined list for a continued conversation for next week, you know, if we could have that, you know, end of the day, Friday or Monday, just so folks can sort of take a look at it. I think, you know, I'd encourage board members to take a look at what we have now and send feedback to Sean over the next day or two if there's something that you really want to.
or you could
Bring to
send
his
an
attention.
email and you'll get it back in 24 hours.
What's that?
You could send,
accordance with
you
the
could send
dispersal.
Sean
Oh,
an
right.
email and get it back in 24
Because of the
Well,
goal?
not yet, it's a goal.
No, it's not a goal
Not
yet.
yet.
You're going to set that goal yet.
Okay, Sean, that rule doesn't apply
Timeline
yet.
on that.
He's gonna hold on to that.
You have until July.
Yeah, we got
or
a timeline.
December, we're not quite sure.
All right, great. Thanks everyone for that conversation. The next,
Can I just make one comment about
Sure.
conversations about goals? I went back and watched the meetings from last year when you guys discussed your goals, and this went far better. So I thank everybody for participating so freely and bringing things to the table.
What
And
month was that?
It was multiple months. I watched multiple meetings, which we all talked about goals last year.
All
So
right.
I was very nervous coming into this conversation that it was just going to sort of not go this way. So I appreciate everybody for.
I'm not going to watch those meetings.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that, Katie, that was helpful.
Katie,
Appreciate you pointing that out.
I noticed Peter and
You met your
David.
goal
Always
of
good.
doing better than
Watch
last year. All
another-
three of you.
I
Congratulations.
appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Wow. Yeah.
All right, consent agenda. On the consent agenda tonight, we have a vote to approve the ABCC Alcohol Beverages Control Commission form regarding our population increase, and then also the minutes from our meetings on December 21st and December 27th. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
I just have one adjustment to the minutes with the turkey trot.
Oh my God, this
Yeah.
is unbelievable.
It's like,
Did
Believe
we not,
it.
did we not
I
put,
didn't
like,
use this
that you actually got first and what your time was?
No, you left my husband out, who's the heart of my family, and I would like him to be in the minutes. His name is John, and he was missing.
Now, we're back
He's
on
the
script
reason-
here.
It is
Now-
the reason
now-
they won.
He's the reason that you
Major
turn on
award.
Humphrey Street is the reason
It is a
the
major
family
award.
has that trophy.
He's the reason
It needs
that the
to be on the
Phelan family
record.
almost ended up in jail that day.
Jail.
Is one of our goals talking about the turkey trot at every meeting?
every meeting.
It might be.
Have we done?
Did you get
It might
that?
be.
You
We're,
got
we're,
that
we're on a
shit?
string of
That
3
might be
meetings
my-
in a row.
That might be my seventh goal.
Well,
All right, so we have
I'm
a,
gonna bring back the trophy.
so a
Just gonna put it,
motion,
you're just gonna have it silently sit next to you
Yep.
at the meetings? Good.
That is.
Nice.
so a motion to approve the consent agenda with that change to the minutes, was that December 21st?
I don't know. I don't have any meetings.
Must have been, yeah, it was December
Yeah.
21st.
It was whenever Santa was here.
Yeah,
So moved.
is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on any of these items? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's great. Town administrators report.
All right. So over the last few weeks, I have reached out and I have asked department heads to submit goals for this upcoming year. I will be reviewing these goals with department heads and looking to align these goals with both the select board's goals and the town administrator's goals. You know, I've been meeting with our Director of Finance and Administration, Amy Darrow, and our Treasurer Collector, Pat Luddy, as we outline the FY24 budget. Meetings with department heads will be ensuing over the next few weeks to really go over the FY24 budget. This year's budget will be very tight. You know, as we've talked about, the collective bargaining contracts that we have approved over the last year will place additional pressure on the financial policy that the Select Board, School Committee, and Finance Committee has established over the last few years to keep a tight handle on the budget. Priorities will need to be really focused. Amy Sarah will join us next week and give the board an update on FY23, but also the FY24 budget development. Jared LaLiberty is doing some absolutely wonderful work on pulling together our town report. Our town clerk is really marshaling all of the department heads to include their annual report, and it's impressive to see each department head's update on all the activities that they've been involved in. He is working also on the annual census for our grants, and he also has some ideas about how to make some changes in his office for staffing, and I expect that it will be following up with a few of those recommendations over the next few weeks. Jeff Vaughn has reported out some of our composting numbers. I want to thank residents that are composting. This helps reduce the cost for our solid waste contracts. It's also an environmental best practice and great for the environment. We have to decrease our solid waste outputs. We've had a few conversations about that, and composting is a great way to reduce a lot of tonnage, especially over holidays. There's information on our website about how to improve your recycling, so please start this new year by not only joining a gym, but being a better environmental steward. We have a wonderful relationship with Black Earth Composting, and there's a great guide to help encourage composting. Senior Center is busy. Our outreach efforts continue at the Swampscott Housing Authority, but also over at the Michon, and a number of senior assisted living centers in Swampscott. The Mass Council on Aging has granted the Swampscott Senior Center a $7,800 grant to help identify individuals as caregivers and we are hosting a caregiver resource fair in May. Thank select board members and others that are going down and meeting with our seniors for lunch. These are wonderful opportunities to just engage with our seniors and really share conversations about things that are meaningful in their lives. The library has a number of book clubs. We have 6 book clubs and 5 miscellaneous clubs. We're doing events for children and teens. Our new library director is absolutely doing wonderful work, just reinvigorating a number of community engagement efforts, and it's really great to see. We are planning a kickoff public engagement event for the Hawthorne, on Saturday, January 28th. We will get some of that information out, hopefully as soon as tomorrow on time, but I want to just highlight that date, and for town residents, we really want to hear Swampscott residents' ideas about what they think we should do with that property over the short and long term. And again, just a reminder, tomorrow we are gathering at Linscott Park at 5 p.m. to really respond to hate, but really show Swampscott just what kind of care and concern we have as a community. And lastly, I just want to recognize that this Monday is Martin Luther King Day. It's important for all of us to think about the life and the legacy of Martin Luther King, and spend some time and really learn about the civil rights movement and the progress that we made in the 60s, and the sacrifices and the challenges that Dr. Martin Luther King confronted, and the work ahead for this generation. It's a long march, but certainly spend some time at the Swampscott Public Library and read a few pieces of literature about the life of Dr. Martin Luther King, and enjoy the weekend. That's my report.
Any questions for Sean?
I just have a question about trash. So I've been getting a call, more than one resident reaching out about trash not being picked up, or recycling not being picked up. So could you just clarify what to do if that should happen?
if that happens, they can contact me or contact the town administrator's office directly. We will reach out to Republic and do our best to get that trash picked up that day. Typically, they are able to come back and pick up the trash or recycling that day, but, you know, there have been instances where they have to get it the next day. But the sooner we get a hold of Republic and the sooner individuals get in touch with my office, the sooner we can help.
Republic's working on a mechanism so that
That's right.
people have their own account. They could call direct too, but I've always called Jeff if they've forgotten, and Jeff gets them right out there.
Sure, they can call the
Really good at,
health department as well, but
Yeah.
Jeff is a one-person office. We typically have
Yeah.
staff in the town administrator's office that can reach out as well.
I have a question on the proposed budget presented to the board on March 1st. Can we get that budget a lot earlier?
That's by charter.
I don't think
So-
so, March 1st, is it?
It is.
I have to double check, look that one up. But, so charter or not, can we get it earlier?
You know, that timeline is pretty much baked into a schedule, but I'll have that conversation with staff. I think we're gonna need that time. The school department doesn't submit their budget until, you know, the second week in February. We need time to kind of,
Okay,
you know, really typically, you know, make these numbers work.
you give the school, you give the schools their numbers, right?
I do. But I give them one number.
Correct,
They have a lot of numbers that they have to make work.
yep, I understand.
Well, in fairness, you give them one number. Last year, if that was an indication of something, you get another number back sometimes.
That's right.
Well, I think last year was the first time another number came back.
In his tenure.
Yes,
Yes, in Sean's tenure, that's correct.
well, that's the only tenure I'm focusing on. Last year was the first time when we had a,
I think if we want to
All
really,
over,
if
so-
we're going to change timelines, if you want things a month earlier, like,
so we would need to probably do it next year.
but we need to, talk about that as a board, and we should meet with the finance committee. We should talk a little bit about, you know, the sequence of budgets. It's, you know, as it stands, you know, we're developing a budget, 6 months prior to its implementation. That's a lot of time.
Well, I can tell you from the finance committee, over the last 7 years, the finance committee has consistently complained that they get the budget too late, that they need a little bit more time. So that was the conversations from the finance committee. So I'm just trying to get us into the mode of getting stuff out a little bit earlier.
Gotcha.
All right, any other questions for Sean? Select board time. Anyone?
I'll give you the update on my committees. On disability, this Disability Commission has now met for the third time. They're working on a communication strategy on what they want to get out to the community and how they're going to work in collaboration with other committees. And they just need a clarification on who the ADA coordinator is. Sean, I said that I would ask here.
The Human Resources Director.
It is, okay,
Okay.
okay. Could you just let him know, too? Okay,
Let him know.
that he's
The-
the ADA?
Sure.
Because I said that to them, and they said they had an email from him that he wasn't.
Okay.
So I said, well, this is my email. On the Council on Aging, they're looking to, they're looking to start a veterans group, so that they can get more veterans just coming in and socializing. They received a grant that's going to help identify people that are support people, caregivers. And with that grant, they're going to send information out. People who are doing caregiving can get that information back to COA, and then COA can get them more assistance. And that, what are you going to call it? They're going to have an expo, or I don't know what the right title would be,
Yeah.
that you were talking about too. That's going to be on May 6th. So if we could just get the word out a little bit more. Heidi Ware, who does an amazing job, said that people don't even realize how much caregiving they're doing and what their needs are until they get out there a little bit more. And Heidi really feels that that the senior center could be more supportive, and they're very excited about it. They really want to get this kitchen going, so the sooner we can put a little bit more work into that, that'll be helpful. The Swampscott of all ages, they had a meeting last week. They had a program last week with over 30 people in attendance on the additional dwelling units. And that's going to be on Swampscott TV, so people who missed it, they can go back. The Solid Waste Committee is requesting, please, if they can get information. They need information so that they can analyze the solid waste, the costs, how it really impacts the town. And I'm not sure what the obstacles are in getting them that information. Is there?
You know, I've reached out to our finance team, and I've asked them to make that information available, and I'll continue to work with them. I think, you know, we can find out how to make that available on a regular basis. My expectation that will happen.
I'm just wondering if is the request too much, or?
No,
just-
I
can we
think we just need to ensure that when the invoices come in, they are
Put into that
made
file?
available and sent out.
Okay, so
I have no concern whatsoever that, you know, the committee can't have that information. I want them to have it. I want
Yeah.
them to study it. I want them to come back and talk about why the numbers,
the numbers are dropping.
Yep.
So that's, that the last meeting was last night, our numbers are
rains, the
dropping.
numbers will go up, but.
Right. They're also going over this survey right now. I want to know from you, where do we stand with the veterans lease?
We had a conversation, I had a conversation 2 weeks ago with town council about, you know, going out to RFP. We are going to have to issue an RFP.
Right.
And it's my hope that we will tailor it in such a way that it will ensure that, you know,
We-
a veteran.
This is probably your inside voice speaking right now.
Yep.
Just need to say that out loud.
Understood. Yep.
All right, but hold on a second.
30 days? 30 days?
Yes, you know, we can get this done in the next 30 days.
Oh, good. All right, that's a good answer.
Wait, be specific, get
The
what done?
RFP out.
The RFP out,
Issue the RFP.
and then
in
have
30
people
days.
respond to
Correct.
the RFP.
Right,
Yes, okay, just want to be clear,
RFP goes out.
within 30
So
days.
we all get that email. We'll have the right answer. And that's all I'd like to thank the fire department for hosting Katie and I to take a tour of the firehouse and to have a conversation with Chief Archer. And it was really a nice morning,
It's lovely.
wasn't it?
So fun.
Katie will be applying for the fire
I
department.
heard that.
She's going to need a waiver, For her
Yeah, you need
age
a
limit,
waiver,
though.
I'm over age, so.
but there is a process that she can apply.
Maybe we can change that.
No, there is a process.
Maybe we can change the age, is what we're saying.
Sean, I think these materials are awesome.
Yep.
You know, so I was just flipping through, and I thought it had a lot of great information.
What's the materials you're
The
looking
the
at?
materials that I'm looking at are related to Swampscott Fire Department recruitment.
I'm Vanna Whiting.
So they're going to
You're
be,
not on TV.
they,
Doo-doo-doo-doo.
so Chief Archer said that they're going to be hiring soon, and this is the hiring, this is the paperwork for hiring.
Package.
This is the package, and it details what's going on, so, and I would like to, before I end, I would like to have some type of an update on where we stand with hiring, both on the police, both on the fire and the police. I mean, I know we have 2 cadets in the academy now, and then we have 2 openings. We have another retirement coming in, and I just like to see the big picture on when spots are gonna get filled. Katie's also looking at that one. There's no age requirement on that.
I would love if the police department could do something similar
Sure.
to this. I mean, I just think this is,
Yep.
I think this is a plethora of incredible information, and maybe this should be a model. For
Yeah, I really do think Chief Archer has done a wonderful job just getting a really great packet of information out. You know, we have over 80 individuals that have signed up to take the exam for the fire department, and you know, we're looking both for police officers and firefighters right now, and it really, you know, is a great opportunity for us to continue to improve. We're a year out of civil service, and we're learning more and more about how to really go out and engage and, you know, be competitive in the recruitment for these incredibly important positions. So, you know, I think it's just his, you know, focus on continual improvement. But I will share that packet with Chief Casada, and we'll continue to, you know, evaluate strategies that can help us be competitive in the employment marketplace.
Thank you.
You all set?
Anything
I am.
else?
I'm
I'll
all
say- Yeah, so I have one thing. I got I got a message from a resident, and the message was shame on me. And I think the shame on me was apparently the police union posted a couple times this week that not a single elected member of town staff or the town administrator or town management, I guess, celebrated National Law Enforcement Day, and that they understood where they stood with us. And I think and I'm sorry that the us versus them mentality seems to continue. I'm going to make it up, though, because there's National Police Remembrance Day on September 29th. There's National Police Memorial Day on October 1st. There's National Police Week, May 15th to 21st. There's Police Commemoration Day, October 21st. And then there's National Police Women Day, September 12th. So we have lots of other days to make it up, and so I wanted to share those so that others weren't shamed, because in the midst of living lives and doing everything, we didn't celebrate, and candidly, an internet-established holiday. We'll do better.
Certainly want to recognize just my brother and my grandfather and a lot of the wonderful Swampscott police officers that put their lives on the line for our freedoms. But, you know, I would hope that nobody would use that as an opportunity to sow division and hate and, you know, all the things that really undermine, I think, the good society. We can all be better. Enough of the us and them.
I think we all can be better, everyone at this table. And, you know, I understand if somebody is frustrated. I can understand. So let's sit down and talk about it. Let's just talk about it. Instead of somebody throws one ball here and another ball there, let's just talk.
What do you want to talk about?
I want to talk, if something went on to social media last night because a union was upset, then come in and talk about it. I don't want to turn around and fight back with the union. I took
Couldn't agree with you more.
I took what you said. I don't think it was called for. I just think, I don't think it brings any peace to our community. That's my point. I just want to have peace in our community and more conversation. If the police department, the union, feels that they're not appreciated, I'd like to sit down and talk about it. Why don't you feel appreciated, and what did I do that made you feel unappreciated? So I don't want to be...
That does sound like a very adult, mature way to handle things. And if I acted in a way that didn't meet that standard because I was reflecting some others that didn't meet that standard, I'm sorry. You're correct. We should do that. I agree with you.
So let's do it.
Here we go.
Katie, do you have anything?
Motion to second.
That is my select board time.
All right, before we adjourn, I'll just say it one more time. No Place for Hate tomorrow night at 5, and Hawthorne Idea Exchange on January 28th.
5. Does anybody work?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.